A question that researchers from a range of fields are currently grappling with, and one that I focused on in my own work, is why so many people are distrustful of consensus science, including evolutionary theory or the safety and efficacy of vaccines. And a follow-on question from that one is, how can we better advocate for consensus science to skeptical publics? Now, it's often assumed that resistance to science occurs due to a shortage of public rationality, as well as absences of knowledge and scientific literacy. And this is what has been described as the information deficit model of science communication. And it posits that the solution to erroneous scientific beliefs or scientific skepticisms involves giving the public more facts. The problem is that research has again and again demonstrated that increasing people's factual knowledge and their understanding of scientific notions often doesn't translate into elevated acceptance levels of scientific premises. In recent studies, researchers have found that when quizzing people who are skeptical of consensus science, so for instance, anthropogenic or anthropomorphic climate change, about the scientific facts related to that, those individuals present the same amount of knowledge, if not more knowledge, about the very same science that they are resisting. So people's measurable understanding of the evidence and theories underlying consensus science is not a reliable indicator of the reception of those same scientific premises. And also, interestingly enough, trying to correct misinformation with scientific data can often be counterproductive, leading to increased resistance to science. So, for instance, we get a number of studies in which people who are hesitant about getting vaccines have a personal meeting with a medical doctor who answers every single question and presents facts to refute every single concern that they have, and then details why vaccines are safe and effective, and those people then end up being more resistant to vaccines. So when it comes to publicly contested science, such as biological evolution or vaccinations, people's views are shaped not merely by data and fact claims, but also by the nuances of persuasion, mixed with sociocultural factors, allied with people's identity, associations, and personal and cultural values. So while increasing scientific knowledge is important, facts and comprehension are clearly not the only ingredients that matter when it comes to publicly contested science. Plus, along with trying to increase knowledge, there have also been efforts to improve people's critical thinking skills, teaching people how to deconstruct arguments and distinguish between valid and invalid claims about science. And associated with these endeavors are academic critiques of counter-science arguments, dismantling the scientific or philosophical deficiencies of anti-evolutionist or science or vaccine skeptical claims. This too is important. But the problem there is that decades of persuasion research has revealed that even if we've been taught critical thinking skills, even as full-time academics, we usually don't have the ability, let's say in terms of time and technical training, or the motivation to diligently evaluate the many persuasive messages that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. Instead, we often rely upon persuasive cues, which are cognitive mental shortcuts or heuristics in decision-making contexts. And along with these cues, these heuristics, there's something called cultural cognition. It has been found that people are predisposed to endorse whichever position on science issues best affirms the core values that define their identities and what they already assume is true, rather than basing decisions upon objective facts. This tendency has been described as identity protective cognition. And through it, worldviews already maintained by the groups that people self-identify with are favored. So they favor ideas that support cultural worldviews that they already maintain. And in a sense, people, as someone has said, are cognitively tribal. And persuasion cues work in tandem with this cultural cognition, the influence of cultural values and social membership. And that's sort of the space that much of my research has been occupied, considering the suasion elements of counter-science media, the cues, the heuristics, and also the values discourses that can make these messages especially persuasive. And one example includes analyzing source cues, the ways that anti-vaccine and anti-evolutionist pundits describe their alleged expertise, and increase their apparent credibility. And how such appeals to credibility are also tied to values claims. Let's say the importance of freedom of thought and academic freedom, or the importance of personal autonomy and other social values. And what I found is that counter-science media tends to contain a wider variety of persuasive cues, such as claims about credibility, in much greater quantities than do communications promoting consensus science. And those persuasive elements are also much more likely to be delivered by means of value-laden language in ways not found in pro-science messages. So then, moving from analyzing the persuasive characteristics of counter-science media, the future of this work is to inform us in how to better construct science advocacy in view of what makes counter-science media so appealing to publics. Because deconstructing the fallacies of counter-science claims is important, but in some ways it misses the point. Because even if such communications are scientifically or philosophically problematic, they can still be persuasive to audiences. And when it comes to how people make decisions about publicly contested science, it's the case that the way science communications are delivered can be as important as the factual bases themselves. And in regards to this future, I kind of see humanities' place to be important, but with regards to that future, it's important because of what humanities has been in the past. Because much of humanities' remit has been in thinking, right? Getting people to think and to think creatively, in critiquing, how to critique arguments, but also humanities has been related to persuasion, rhetoric. So who better to speak to ideas of persuasion than people in the humanities? Thank you.